Happy Friday and welcome back to Brain Scratch. I'm John Lordan. Thank you so much for spending some time with me here today. I had a viewer reach out and say, "Hey John, do you remember all those news stories about Lake Mead last year and all the bodies that were being found out there?" And I remember hearing about the headlines. I looked into a few of them at the time, and there was kind of this assumption that, well, it's Las Vegas, it's Lake Mead. I mean, that's where all the mobsters would bury their bodies. But we heard about one set of remains, then two, then three, then four. And all the news stories kind of still had that tone of, well, it's Lake Mead, mobsters. Is it really that simple? Is there more to it? Have any of these remains been identified, or at least are there some decent leads in terms of who these people are? We're going to look into all of that together here today. Let's go ahead and get started at Wikipedia so we can learn a little bit about Lake Mead, why these bodies are now showing up, and then we'll get into the details on the individual cases. Lake Mead is a reservoir formed by the Hoover Dam on the Colorado River in the southwestern United States. It's located in the states of Nevada and Arizona, 24 miles east of Las Vegas. It is the largest reservoir in the U.S. in terms of water capacity. Lake Mead provides water to the states of Arizona, California, and Nevada, as well as some of Mexico, providing sustenance to nearly 20 million people and large areas of farmland. I've seen that number kick around. I've seen 20, 25. I've even seen as high as 40 million people. So obviously a lot of people relying on this for water, but also electricity. This helps keep Hoover Dam going and generating electricity. At maximum capacity, Lake Mead is 112 miles long, 532 feet at its greatest depth, and it has a surface area of 247 square miles. This thing is giant. It contains 28.23 million acre-feet of water. The lake has remained below full capacity since 1983 as of May 31st of 2022, which coincidentally is right around the time frame that we start hearing about these discoveries. It only held 26.63% of its full capacity. It had dropped in June of 2021 below the reservoir's previous all-time low. And the pictures kind of tell the story. Here we see a beautiful photo of the Lake Mead National Recreation Area run by the National Park Service. Looks like a healthy lake, but as we start looking at some of these other photos, they actually have signs to designate where the water line was in different years. And what I find interesting about this is, first of all, this water line's only from back in 2002. Is that a road that's been built on it, or is it a boat ramp possibly? I don't know, but you can see how far down this is, and that's from 2002 here. It's even much lower in this photograph. Look at the water line for 2021, and then look how much farther back the water is from there. It looks like pretty dire circumstances happening out there. And with this water level dropping, there's been some things that have already been discovered out there outside of the bodies. It's not only an essential water source, but Lake Mead is also a popular boating destination and recreational area. However, 5 of the 6 boat ramps are currently closed. According to the Park Service, the park shorelines have changed due to the dwindling water levels. Climate change and 20-year drought are the main cause to blame for that. Here's another photo of it. And you can just see, I mean, this used to basically be underwater over here, sections of this, and it's now just receding. It's just pulling back farther and farther. So what else have they found in here? As I mentioned, of course, the remains. We will get to those. World War II era boat was found in there, a wrecked Higgins boat from the Second World War. The park administration, they're not even sure how it ended up there. Somehow a World War II era boat. A B-29 Superfortress crashed into it in 1948. Something went awry when the B-29 performed a test flight close to Lake Mead. Amazingly, the 5-person crew made it out alive. The plane's location was actually found in 2003, 55 years after the incident. It's now visible for the first time since the crash due to the lake's declining level. I think that also speaks to how this lake is receding. They didn't even know. They had the survivors, and they couldn't locate the plane for 50 years, over 50 years. But now you can practically go out there and check it out for yourself. St. Thomas, an old Mormon frontier settlement, has recently resurfaced. And look, I mean, you can go walk around this. Like you can walk on this. This isn't even in the water anymore. Also, walls of the Hoover Dam, they're showing not only where it gets close to the Hoover Dam, and look at the discolorization that's happening on the rocks here. That used to be the water level, kind of where the darker and the light meet. And it's just going down and down. But these, what looks like these big pylons here, these are actually intake towers for the dam. The water is supposed to be going in from up here, and that's getting lower and lower as well. That's why they have all these grading, this grading built on here. It's basically, like a first level filtration. As of June 2022, the intake towers that feed the electricity generators at Hoover Dam are almost completely exposed. Just to give you a sense of kind of the change that's going on out there. But how does this lead into the mystery for today? Bodies are emerging in Lake Mead because of drought. This article from May 10th, 2022. For the second time in 7 days, human remains have been discovered in Lake Mead near Vegas. I couldn't find any articles about the first one on its own because the second discovery came so quick. Basically, about 6 days later was the second discovery. The decayed body of a man was found stuffed in a steel barrel. So we're talking about the first instance here. I believe it was May 7th off the top of my head, if I'm remembering that right. And of course, you have a body found in a barrel in this area with the history of Las Vegas and its ties to the mob. Are you going to have people theorize? And is it even a good theory that, hey, maybe there is some mob-related activity that wound up in this victim being placed into a barrel and put into this lake? Yes, I think that's absolutely reasonable. But the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, they're kind of cautious about that. What seems to happen is as the reporting goes on, that little thing kind of gets twisted a little more. At some point, it's almost like the press decided that the police said this was that the police were theorizing this was connected to the mob. I haven't seen any quotes of that directly. The information that I've bumped into, the police have been pretty straight up that we don't know. They do think it's certainly a homicide. But how do you go from, first of all, they don't even know who the victim is. There's pretty clear evidence it's a homicide. How do you make that jump to, well, this has to be mob related? According to the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, we believe this is a homicide as a result of a gunshot wound, said Lieutenant Ray Spencer, head of their homicide section. The body found May 1st, according to this article. Spencer said the Clark County Medical Examiner is attempting to identify the body. He said detectives believe the man was killed in the mid-1970s to early 1980s based on his clothing and footwear. And what's kind of amazing about it is he was found in this barrel. I don't know how much more complete this barrel might have been. They do assume that it was fully closed in at one point, but I don't know how long it was open. I don't know if someone came across it thinking, hey, maybe there's something in here we would want, scavengers of some kind or something, and they kind of cracked it open, saw what was in there, and just left it. I'm not sure. I have seen other photos of the actual remains, and for remains that have been kept in there for decades at this point, they're pretty complete. And the clothing in particular is pretty complete. Obviously, some very big clues that might help just with some traditional police work. We've got decades on this case, though, so, trying to figure out where those shoes might have been bought from, where that clothing might have come from. Obviously not going to be as easy as if this was a victim for modern era, someone that had died within the past year or so. But traditional police methods may be at play with some of this based on just the way that I've seen the evidence, at least in the barrel, actually survive the years. The second body was found by two sisters, Lindsay and Lynette Melvin, who said they were paddleboarding on the lake because the water was too shallow to go snorkeling. They stopped to explore a sandbar that they said used to be underwater. At first, they thought it was the remains of a bighorn sheep. They then discovered a human jawbone with teeth still attached and reported them to National Park Service rangers. Jeff Schumacher, a mob historian and vice president of exhibits and programs at the Mob Museum in Las Vegas, said disposing of a body in a barrel is a classic mob technique dating back to the 1880s. He said one famous case was that of Chicago gangster John Handsome Johnny Roselli, who helped the mob control Hollywood and the Las Vegas Strip. Roselli disappeared after testifying in 1975 before the U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence about an alleged conspiracy to assassinate President JFK. His decomposing remains were discovered in 76, stuffed inside a 55-gallon steel barrel. Basically, same type of barrel we were just looking at, that a fisherman found floating in Dunfermline Bay near Miami. So obviously, no direct connection here, but especially this guy from the Mob Museum, he's popping up in a lot of these articles. There's a lot of speculation, and at first you're getting kind of these giant names thrown at this. One of the articles we're going to look at is even like, could this be Jimmy Hoffa? Is this Bugsy? Like, I mean, it's just, what strikes me is after doing this type of work for as long as I have, I know that people always go to kind of those big names where there's a discovery like this and thinking this might be that person. And the reality of our world is there's just so many people here. The odds of that are extremely, extremely slim. Does it get amped because of the type of discovery that has been made here? I mean, we've got a body in a barrel, and we can note that, yeah, there seems to be some mob activity where this has been done before. Absolutely. But does the mob operate only based on these guys with these big giant names? No. There's tons of people that are all part of this as well, all kinds of different levels, and who knows? It's hard to get your head around the different possibilities of this. And this is a recreational area, which is really going to tie in with some of the other discoveries. It's interesting because I think the news publications figured out, hey, if we keep talking about the mob, oh, we found another body. Oh, the mob. They knew they were going to get the clicks, but the realities of some of the other discoveries, I don't know. Even that second discovery, we basically have skeletal remains found on a sandbar. No obvious signs of trauma. This first one, this guy was shot in the back of the head. He was stuffed into a barrel. Very clear what's happening there. The second one, they're literally just bones found on a sandbar. How do you know what occurred there? And being in a recreational area, accidents are going to happen. So it's interesting as we get through things, I think, that you'll see the perception that the headlines were kind of giving us, not always exactly what's going on with these cases. But let's go ahead and continue. At the Associated Press, there's no telling what we'll find in Lake Mead, said former Las Vegas Mayor Oscar Goodman. It's not a bad place to dump a body. Goodman was a defense attorney who represented mafia figures before serving 3 terms as a martini-toting mayor who made public appearances with a showgirl on each arm. He added that a lot of his former clients seem interested in climate control, mob speak for keeping the lake level up and bodies down in their watery graves. This is another guy that, at least around the discovery of the first body, he's quoted everywhere. He's doing, I don't know if he did more than one interview, but that interview he did is basically picked up and run with by many different publications. I've read most of it. Again, it's really just leaning into, theorizing on potential gangsters that could be that first person, but it's not even solid enough for me to really want to share it with you guys. It's kind of just like, hey, there was this person back at that time. Maybe it's them. Kind of like what we see happening here at gambling.com. Who's in the Lake Mead barrel? We got a picture of Jimmy Hoffa. Police have noted that positive identification could be difficult to determine. Some believe the person was a mob murder victim or long ago casino thief. Others are saying it could be former labor leader Jimmy Hoffa. The time frame of the barrel incident coincides with mafia involvement in Las Vegas. It does, from what I understand, basically 50s, 60s, 70s. I don't know how much into the 80s and 90s. And we've got this victim kind of pegged at mid 70s into the 80s. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert on the mob stuff. To be perfectly honest with you guys, I've never been a huge fan. I love Las Vegas. I'm planning on going again soon. But I've never been a fan of the whole mob backstory. I had some friends that were going to the Mob Museum. They're like, you want to go? I'm like, nope. I have no interest in mob stories. It's interesting. I did an interview recently that was kind of talking about ethics and true crime. And, there's a lot of people questioning, like, why do we do what we do? And why are you guys watching what we do? I feel the exact same way about the kind of glorification of mob life. Like, why do we look at it that way? Why is The Godfather the favorite movie of so many people? It's really interesting to me that in some aspects we can glorify something like that, and then in other ones we kind of push away from it or point our finger at other people that are consuming that type of content. But just so you guys know, I'm trying to be perfectly upfront. I'm not the biggest mob fan. If you look into, especially the barrel victim, you're going to find a lot more rabbit holes to go down with this. But from what I saw, they're super high level, outside of one or two, which I actually will kind of weave in a little bit here as we're going through. But let's continue here. First of all, a problem with the Hoffa theory. Hoffa went missing in Detroit. Over the years, the search for Hoffa's body has led to authorized digs at certain sites and a rumor that he might have been buried at Giant Stadium in New Jersey. That's the one that I always heard. The NFL stadium has been demolished without any evidence of Hoffa's remains. I wonder if when they were demolishing it, if they were actually processing it with that in mind. If I recall correctly, I think they had some ideas, like particular sections that he might have been in. So I don't know if they really processed it with that in mind. I mean, it would really slow down a demolition. And for some of those extremely large structures, I don't know about that one in particular, like they blow them up. They have controlled blasts for taking that stuff down. So I don't know. I don't know how safe they would have been. Lieutenant Ray Spencer of the LVPD told CNN, "We believe this is a homicide as a result of a gunshot wound. The man had been shot in the back of the head." As they try to identify the victim, another clue was the man's clothing and his shoes. They appear to be from the 70s or early 80s and from a brand sold at Kmart. So once again, just kind of on the police investigation front, they know that it's a brand sold at Kmart, but we're talking about decades ago. Like if that was more recent, they might be able to go to that retailer and say, it's this particular model. When did you have these in your stores? And at least be able to get it down to a range of like, okay, look, Kmart only sold those from 1978 on. So we know that this person had to have bought these no earlier than 1978. And maybe that would help them kind of get this time range squeezed down a little bit. I'm not seeing any analysis. They actually do share some more information with us as the months go on, but I'm not seeing any analysis kind of on that front to help really narrow this time frame. Continuing at ktnv.com, we find out that the probability of finding more bodies at Lake Mead is high, according to former coroner Mike Murphy. Over his tenure, he says that bodies in barrels weren't that uncommon. However, he says generally they're actually found on dry land. And even the guy from the Mob Museum, I saw some quotes from him where he was talking about usually they don't want people to be found, so they're not going to put them in a body of water. They're actually going to just drive out to the middle of the desert somewhere and bury them. And to the point, that's what the coroner here is saying. Murphy says when the barrels sealed, the bodies continue to decompose. Remains buried for decades, hundreds of feet below the surface, makes identification even more difficult. They're going to be looking at the bones. They're going to be looking at the teeth, the DNA. They're going to look at a variety of things. And all of those things are all little pieces of the puzzle that they drop into place. But he's saying that puzzle may take years to solve. Timing is everything. You have to pull all this information together, he said. And at this point, as of when I'm recording this, we're about 10 months away from the discovery of the first one. It's not going to be tomorrow. It's not going to be overnight, but I do believe it's going to happen, he said. I'm a firm believer that it will happen. So he's confident there will be an identification. And of course, with where we are today with DNA, there's a possibility of familial genealogy being used here and really helping to identify this person. Here is the barrel. Thankfully, they've blurred the image of the remains here. LVMPD, I think I said LVPD before. Sorry, guys. I know you're the Metropolitan Police Department. Lieutenant Ray Spencer said they know exactly how the crime was committed. Someone had to have a boat. Someone had to put someone in the barrel and push them off the boat. I'll even add one to that. We know the guy is shot. So once again, it looks like Lieutenant Spencer kind of approaching it from more traditional detective work. A boat is part of this. Where the barrel came from could be part of this. There's a weapon that's part of this. And of course, there's a person maybe more than one person that's a part of this. So a number of leads, but this far away from the time of it happening, especially if you're relying on social information, that's got to be tough, because we've got people that are passing away as these years go on. This isn't just a handful of years, this is decades. Spencer said his team will investigate whether the murder could have ties to organized crime if they're able to extract DNA from the remains. You notice I'm saying if, because it will be a very challenging part of this investigation, he said. The bones are in the hands of the Clark County Coroner's Office. When you have remains that have been exposed to the elements, it makes it incredibly challenging to get an ID, said Clark County Coroner Melanie Rouse. So definitely some challenges there on the DNA front as well. And of course, nowadays, we're really looking at DNA for solving so many of these cases. In my mind, it's almost one of the first things that you might want to go after, or at least start that process while you're running the rest of the investigation. Here we are 10 months later. Do we have a confirmation on victim number 1 yet? Vegas Justice League offers Metro help. Vegas has their own Justice League? Of course they do. They have everything. Founder Justin Wu said he has offered to pay for genealogical comparison through Texas-based Othram Laboratories if and when investigators harvest a sample from the remains. What a cool organization. I love that. They're basically willing to pay for the comparison, and they're lining it up with Othram, who does really, really good work in this space. They can extract DNA from like minuscule samples. They are just amazing at this. We just think it's great for the community to support the local law enforcement, Wu said. He founded the Justice League to bring decades-old cases to a close, and they've had recent successes. Othram Labs DNA analysis and comparison goes beyond standard checks against more traditional criminal databases by running their results through genealogical databases like 23andMe and searching for familial matches. I wouldn't be surprised if they were to get a good DNA sample from Metro, that they would be able to get a good lead for Metro PD to work, he said. And I think he's right, but it's all back to that question of, are they going to get a good sample? What happens during the decomposition if a body is in a barrel? Does that actually help in some way? Or if it's in water, does that help in some way? I think it might be a bit different than the remains that were found up on the sandbar, where maybe they were exposed to the sun for quite a bit longer. I'm also curious, how long was that barrel up there? I mean, this is, I've told you guys the dimensions of the lake. This thing's giant. So the beach around it, also giant. How much of that is accessible or used by people that are doing recreational activities? I don't know. But that barrel doesn't look wet, at least in the photos. It looks like it's been out for a while. So that might be a part of this as well. If it is a situation where you had someone that opened it up and went, oh no, this is a body, leave it alone, I'm getting out of here. Did they leave it in that state where the sun could have been beating down on it for a prolonged period of time? We might find some more details about the condition of the remains and how those come into effect here as we keep going through these articles. Over at independent.co.uk, just another picture that's really telling the story, at least from Lake Mead's perspective. A dry boat in a dried out river bottom. Jeffrey Schumacher, once again, the gangster historian, has some more information for us. What does he say in this case? He believes, first of all, he goes into one theory here, but then he basically discounts it himself. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Jay Vandermark, he doesn't think is really reasonable, but for some reason, he's a historian, so he's still going to tell you all about this guy. He does believe there are 2 other men who went missing around the same time frame who are more likely possibilities. And I kind of appreciate that these are people that are maybe not like, big, super famous, high level mobsters like the first thoughts that were kind of rolling out when the news stories started kicking out on this. William Crespo was a drug mule who had accepted immunity from the government to become an informant, and he was a witness against the big drug ring, says Mr. Schumacher. He vanished in 1983, and the case was dropped without his testimony. Kind of situation where you might run into his body later. It seems like it. Then there was Johnny Pappas, a casino employee tied in with the mob who disappeared in 1976. His car was found in the parking lot of Circus Circus 4 days after he was last seen, and there's been no sign of him since. Circus Circus over on the strip. If his car's found over there, why are you going to think that he's out at the lake? Admittedly, it's just a drive away, about 30 miles or so. But Pappas also managed a hotel at Lake Mead, and he was trying to sell a boat that he had docked there at the time that he went missing. That's kind of grabbing my brain and is interesting. I'm curious about what happens to that boat. Is there any history on the boat that they can track and kind of say, well, he was selling this boat and we don't know what happened from there? I mean, as far as I know, I think boats have to be registered, so there should be some record of what happens to that boat as it moves on. But Mr. Schumacher concludes with, it stands to reason that someone tied to the lake as he was could have ended up being dumped there. Definitely a possibility, but with his vehicle being left back at Circus Circus, I mean, I guess if you were going to try to throw someone off a trail, you take his car from the lake, you drive it back, get to where you're going, which is close to the strip. You could pick up all kinds of different methods of travel from there and take off. Maybe. Over at 8 News Now, we learn the FBI offers to assist with the investigation, specifically into the body found in the barrel. The spokeswoman would not comment further on the reason for the agency's assistance. It's not uncommon for the FBI to assist local police in high-profile investigations, which this seems to have turned into pretty quickly, that may require additional resources or that could involve a suspect who crossed state lines. Now, that could have been a little bit of a tell if maybe they did identify who the person was and they did find that it's someone that didn't live in that area. Not to mention, you got people traveling to Las Vegas all the time from different places. So maybe it was part of that consideration. Maybe one of those things is why the FBI is a part of it, but regardless, they are assisting. Continuing at KFOR.com, we get kind of the first of the articles where people are reaching out saying, this might be someone that's related to me. Man suspects remains exposed at Lake Mead might be father based on the photos of teeth. So I'm trying to not get into these pictures too much, but the sisters that found body number 2 took a ton of photos and then they got released to the press and they're everywhere. In one of those photos, you can very clearly see the bottom jawbone and you can see that there are teeth in several positions, but there's also teeth that are missing from certain sections of it. And that's kind of leading someone to believe, hey, that actually could be my father. Daniel Khalid was 22 when he drowned in Colville Bay in 1958, and his body was never recovered. We actually have a picture of him here, and I believe that might be him. Yeah, it's him holding his son Todd. Todd's the one that thinks that this could be his father. Daniel was on a speedboat with a friend when they hit a wake. Both men flipped and fell into the water, and only one of the men survived. Since the lake's filling in the 1930s, 300 people have drowned in its waters, Park Service officials said. So that's another aspect here. And already for the second victim, we have a very different type of story. I don't know that this is the actual case, but we do have Todd thinking, this could be my father. He had an accidental death there, and now we're bumping into this information. There's a lot of accidental deaths that happened there, 300 since the lake was built. Not only have they had a few hundred lives lost, according to this article, Lake Mead ranked deadliest national park in Nevada. And this is an article from 2017, so the numbers are going to be a little different, obviously. At this point, they were reporting that the park had seen 278 fatalities. And I did look at some stats for this that are more recent. At this point, the park is down to, it seems like, 1 or 2 fatalities per year. Interestingly, during the discovery of all these bodies, there's other things that happen there. We have someone that goes out on a jet ski. I don't believe they were wearing a flotation device. They fell off the jet ski. They wound up drowning. I think in my research, and I'm not going to weave these in because we've got enough to focus on with these bodies, I think I saw 3 or 4 additional bodies that were found around that area. Not always in the water. 2 of them, if I recall right, were in the water and 2 of them were outside, but in that same vicinity. This article is talking specifically about fatalities in the water. And at this point, the water level's so low, I think that the number of fatalities is obviously going to go down. It is trending downward over like the last 5 years. According to Outside Magazine, that number 278 is about 100 more than the next ranked position, which is Yosemite. And then there's the third ranked Grand Canyon. I don't know if they're saying that it's 100 more than both of those combined. Unfortunately, they don't have those numbers here, but roughly 1/3 of the park's fatalities in the past 10 years are due to drownings in the lake. I'm surprised that it's only 1/3 that are drownings in the lake for those fatalities. I don't know if there's other, like people having a medical event or something like that, if they don't count that necessarily. But yeah, I'm surprised that that's not higher, just based on the fatalities that are happening out there. And, we've looked into fatalities in water previously, of course, when we were doing research on the smiley face killer theory. We know that men in particular around large bodies of water, men of certain age range, are like 8 out of 10 fatalities. Young men, I think, is the next highest group in terms of fatalities around bodies of water as well. But let's see if we learn more. We do. Very soon in July of 2022, a third set of remains would be found. At around 4:30 p.m. on a Monday, National Park Service rangers received a witness report of human remains discovered at Swim Beach in Lake Mead National Recreation Area. According to officials, park rangers are now on the scene and have set a perimeter to recover the remains. We actually get a little more detail on the actual find, including there's footage here. It's been blurred out, but this is from the family that was there and made the discovery. We are in shock. Family discovers human remains at Lake Mead. Jesus Catalan said shortly after he and his family arrived at Swim Beach, his daughter noticed something in the water. When my daughter got close to the water, she came back and said, "Dad, I think there's a barrel in the water, and it looks like a body." He said he thought it was a joke because they were in a touristy area and figured that someone would have seen the remains. We were left in shock, and my kids didn't want to continue our picnic. They said, "Let's go," and we left. We're still in shock, he said. This is the third body found in Lake Mead in just the past 3 months. The first, back in early May, was also found in a barrel, says Fox 5 Vegas. And this is part of what happens with the reporting around this, unfortunately. When I saw that, I was like, okay, we've got a second barrel victim. This is going to spin up the kind of mob talk on this again. Later information that I found, this was not in a barrel. This was not a complete set of remains. This is a portion of a torso that is found at this point. And once again, from what I understand, no obvious signs of trauma. So this could be potentially an accident victim, something else that has happened out there. But of course, maybe you have a question of why is it only a portion of the remains as well. It does look like, based on the footage that they have here, it might have floated away from where the rest of the remains are and kind of made its way to the shoreline. Would more of those remains be found? Let's continue here. The National Park Service did not say in a statement how long officials think the corpse was submerged in the Boulder Beach area before it was found Monday by people who summoned park rangers. That's one of the things I was wondering too, when I just ran into the information about that. Like, could this be a recent victim? It's a bit different than the explanation that we were hearing about skeletal remains and how those were found, or the remains in the barrel seem more complete because all of it has been kept together essentially in the barrel. There was really no description in this one. It's later information that told me that it was part of a torso. But Clark County Coroner Melanie Rouse said Tuesday it was partially encased in mud at the waterline of the swimming area along the shore north of Hemingway Harbor Marina. The gender of the dead person was not immediately apparent. Once again, we know we're dealing with just a portion of them. And it was too early to tell a time, cause, and manner of death. Investigators will review missing persons records as part of their effort, Rouse said. And continuing over at CNN.com, finally in August, we get kind of an official release of information from them. You know, they've had 3 bodies come up at this point. It's grabbed worldwide attention, really. It's spun off all this talk about, mobsters and are we going to keep finding bodies as Lake Mead keeps getting lower and lower. So it looks like they try to address it a bit, and they put some information out. They do an interview with CNN. What do we learn here? The bodies could have been submerged in the lake's depths decades ago, leaving the 3 sets of remains in advanced stages of decomposition and making it increasingly difficult to extract DNA. but officials have already discovered key details. For the first set, the remains in a barrel, investigators, right off the bat, they treated it as a homicide. Lieutenant Jason Johansson told CNN the gunshot wound was obvious, the circumstances clearly suspicious. Coroner Rouse has since preliminarily ruled the cause and manner of death was homicide by gunshot. The remains have been dubbed Hemingway Harbor Doe by the coroner's office. Johansson told CNN that the clothing was so well preserved in the freshwater environment that investigators were still able to read the clothing labels. So they know more information about the clothing. They're not quite releasing that publicly. I don't know how helpful that would be, especially if they're kind of popular brands. We already have families that are keeping an eye on this, that are saying that could be my loved one. That could be, if you release something like, oh, these were, we noticed a pair of Levi jeans on this person, it could only put them through more emotional turmoil. But obviously they do have information on the clothing labels. The other interesting aspect is considering the freshwater environment, kind of preserving those items. Is that going to have some effect on the actual remains or on the DNA and the possibility of getting a good sample from that? If you think about what the age of who your witness or anybody related to this case would be, many of them are getting older every day, and they're at an age where you have to worry, are they even alive? So I would say that's probably our biggest concern right now, he said. Rouse has preliminarily determined that the age of the person in the second set of remains is approximately between 23 and 37 years old. And those type of determinations, based on what I've seen happen with unidentified bodies and them being matched up, like we see happen on NamUs and on web sleuths and things like that, those age ranges, they do as good as they can, but they're not super, super solid. You might have some flux around that age range. And you're thinking, wow, flux around this is already, a 14-year difference that they're talking about here? Yeah, you could still have a considerable number of years kind of on either side of that come into play here. But at least they're trying to ratchet it down a bit. Preliminary cause of death for the second set of remains, undetermined. The Colville Bay remains are more skeletal than the other two sets, Rouse said. The cooler underwater temperatures would cause a body to decompose more slowly than if it were baking under the desert sun, she explained. So based on what she's saying there, I think there's probably a better chance of actually getting a DNA sample from the first set than the second. The second looks like that they were out and exposed for a while, although they were kind of partially covered by sand, but parts of them were exposed. So maybe that'll come into play with DNA with them as well. The final remains, the third set, are only partial remains, and Rouse is still processing them to determine what can even be examined based on their condition. Police are not investigating the other two sets of remains because so far there's no sign of foul play or suspicious circumstances in the deaths. So once again, very clear message from them here. We know the first one's a homicide. We're working that case. These other two, we don't have any reason to really press on an investigation quite yet. Big, bold letters here. No strong connection to organized crime yet, police say. And I haven't seen anything that flips that around. I've just seen all of a sudden certain places report, yeah, the police think that this could be related to the mob. I haven't seen any direct quotes of where that's coming from. Why did the FBI reach out? The FBI reached out to Las Vegas. I'm surprised the spokesperson wouldn't have just told them this when the first publication asked. The FBI reached out because the body is found on National Park Service land. So of course, they want to assist with that. As the information about the Colville Bay Doe comes out, and that age range in particular, we once again hear from Todd Colid. With each clue, I always expect in my mind that it's going to put us farther away from our goal, but consistently each clue is putting us closer, and this is like a bullseye. So basically, it's in the age range of his father when he went missing. One of the other things that Todd has done is he took pictures that the sisters had taken of the jawbone, and he talked to a dentist about it. His father apparently was missing several front teeth, and I think he had a partial for them. The dentist looked at the picture, and the jawbone was missing teeth in a similar place. Dennis said there's a good chance that those teeth were actually missing before this person died. So Todd's got a few reasons to think, hey, this might be my dad. But interestingly, the coroner's office has not followed up with the Collard family to get a sample of their DNA, Todd said. A spokesperson for the office said investigators had pulled DNA from the skeletal remains and from the body discovered in a barrel. Of course, we know they are going to test DNA on both of those, but they haven't contacted Todd's family. The pace of being contacted about a DNA sample, I'm starting to lose hope a little bit, he said. Maybe this new finding lights something up. So it's like he wants it. Of course he does. He wants to be tested against this to see, are these remains my father? But it looks like that phone call just isn't happening. As we hit August of 2022, fourth set of remains discovered. National Park Service rangers received an emergency call reporting remains once again at Swim Beach. Now, this is the same location as number 3, which is not a set of remains, remember. It is a torso, part of a torso, from what I understand. This comes just 12 days after the third set of remains was discovered in the same area. As soon as I saw this, the first thing I thought of, is there a possibility that these are actually the same person? I know that just in casual conversation about this case, I've always heard 6 sets of remains that have been found out there. The truth of it, after looking into it now, number 3 is not a complete set. Number 4 could actually be related to number 3. So essentially, we've got one less body out of that number of 6, possibly. I still don't have a solid confirmation on that, though I did run into some information that the coroner's kind of thinking the same way. 2 sets of partial human remains found at Lake Mead may be the same person, the coroner says. The partial skeletal remains that were discovered August 6th near the Boulder Beach area were located in the same area as the partial remains that were found on July 25th. At this time, the coroner said the investigation into these remains includes working to determine whether the 2 sets of remains are from the same person or not. The coroner's office notes that the process for identifying the remains discovered at Lake Mead includes examinations to determine the gender and approximate age, height, and weight of each decedent, the collection of DNA samples, the quality of which can be greatly affected by time and environmental conditions, and comparing findings to information about people who have been reported missing over the years. I mean, essentially, they're kind of taking the NamUs approach to this. They're going to hit their missing persons records. They're going to see if, the remains that they do find match any of those records right off the bat, which is just a solid approach. I mean, that's why NamUs is as successful and important as it actually is. We get another family member speaking up here. A sister says the skeletal remains at Lake Mead are her missing brother. And here is a picture of him. Let's learn more. Barbara Brock told KVVU that she believes the first set of remains, so the barrel, could be her brother. She said her brother, Bobby Eugene Shaw, has been missing for about 45 years. She said that in her case, she had what Todd's been waiting for. Police actually contacted her about collecting DNA samples because they do believe that her brother matches the description of the body inside that barrel. Now, this is happening, what's the date on this article? August of 2022. And here we are in March. I can tell you, I have not heard a confirmation or another outcome for this test. So is there a possibility that this could be Bobby Shaw? Definitely. Police said the time frame of when Shaw went missing also matched the timetable of the remains. Brock said her brother was involved with the mafia, which may have had some connection to his disappearance. She hopes for concrete answers. We're praying that it's Bob, she said. I know he's gone, but a definite knowing would make me feel better. So we do have a possibility here. We know it's a solid possibility because law enforcement has reached out, and kind of to support the assumption that many of us had, it does seem like he was tied with the mob in some way. He has disappeared. He could be the victim. Shock twist as decomposed torso found at Lake Mead tied to unlikely victim. So we do hear about the torso here. Kenneth Funk was 56 on June 19th of 2004. Basically, this is another family that's coming forward. His daughter, Jessica, thinks that that might be her father. The day before Father's Day in 2004, Funk was on Lake Mead with his wife, Annette, and two other family members when a wave hit their pontoon. His wife was thrown into the water without a life jacket, prompting Funk to turn off the engine and jump in after her. He gave her the life jacket, and then they were in the water together, and he treaded water as long as he could, his daughter said. He then couldn't continue treading water, and he drowned, actually saving his wife's life. The family feels confident that swimmers recovered his body in late July. Basically, his daughter has looked at photos. I guess there was photos of those remains that were also made public, and she feels pretty confident that that could be a match for her father. It is part of a torso. From other information that I've seen, it does include tissue, so we're not just talking skeletal in that way. So maybe there is something to that. I'm really starting to feel bad for this coroner's office. They're trying to get information out about the first few victims. They've now had 4 sets, and then here we are in the middle of August, 5th set of skeletal remains found, again near the swim beach area of the lake. Not a lot of other detail outside of that, but they do also note that Lake Mead's water level has plummeted to less than a quarter full and is entering dangerously close to a point where not enough water would flow to produce hydroelectric power at the Hoover Dam on the Nevada-Arizona border. It's crazy. It's crazy. So even if we do consolidate, and we don't know for fact, but if you do consolidate the remains found at Swim Beach, remains number 3 and 4 to 1 victim, we still have at least 4 victims, if not 5. Just a few days after that, we get another interesting twist. A gun is found near the spot of the barrel victim, victim number 1. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department told KTNV that a journalist discovered the gun at Hemingway Harbor. According to police, it's not unheard of to find firearms in the lake. However, in May, a barrel full of human remains was discovered in the same area. Possibly the murder weapon? There's a possibility. It's not been confirmed whether the gun is related to the human remains, although police said previously the remains belonged to a shooting victim. How many guns do you think would be out there? I have no idea. Is it a common thing to lose firearms from a boat or to go out there and toss a gun in the water? I think there's a reasonable chance that the gun could be related to the crime, but I also don't know what the conditions would have done to it and how helpful would it be. Are you going to be able to test fire it? Are you going to be able to make some kind of determination that it's the weapon that was actually used? I don't know. A lot of questions here, a lot of really, really tough challenges kind of on the forensic science front. And we've gone through all these articles. We've had all these discoveries. We've got people with all these different theories. We've got families that are reaching out thinking this might be the thing to give them some relief in their personal struggles. Has anyone actually been identified? Yes. Thankfully, authorities identify 1 set of remains. We do have a solid confirmation on one of them. The remains found May 7th at Colville Bay are the remains of Thomas Erndt of Las Vegas, said county spokesman Dan Coolin. Unfortunately, those are the same remains that Todd thought might be his father. So it is not Todd's father. Unfortunately, Todd is still waiting, and who knows, maybe one of these other remains will help bring the answers that he's waiting for. Erndt was reported to have drowned August 2nd, 2002. The identification was based on investigative information, DNA analysis, and reports from the original incident, Coolin said in a statement. The cause and manner of Mr. Ernst's death is undetermined. A death notice in the Las Vegas Review-Journal published August 8th, 2002 said Erndt jumped from a boat and was missing and presumed drowned. An obituary in the Cincinnati Enquirer said Erndt died in an accident in Lake Mead and that he was a devoted father of 2. Erndt was formerly of the College Hill neighborhood of the city. So while we have Todd not getting his answer, we have another family that was waiting for answers that do get theirs. He was the most awesome father I can ever ask for, said Tom Erndt. I miss him every day. And Tom kicked in some photos here. Let's just bring these up real quick so we can see. There is Tom with his father. And it looks like Tom also has a sister. And there's even the family on the boat. Oh, man. Tom was just 10 years old when he lost his father on Lake Mead. It was a boating trip where everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Friday, August 2nd, 2002. The Ernst family went out late at night from Colville Bay for a midnight cruise, as they called it. Tom went out on the boat with his father, sister, and several family members and friends. It was a night when nobody else would get in the water, so Thomas Ernst took off his shirt and jumped in. He was a big joker and stuff too, recalled Tom, Ernst's son. At first, it was like, oh, I'm drowning, ha ha ha, kind of thing. And then it turned into screaming and yelling and I need help. It was pitch black and the waves were picking up. They couldn't get the boat started and Tom's sister couldn't get a call out on her cell phone. Once they finally reached 911, it was too late. It was the last time anyone saw Thomas Ernst. He was 42 years old. Back to the point I was making earlier about the age range, he's outside of it. But again, that's just the nature of those types of estimates. I've always thought something would pop up, but just knowing in my head, I guess it kept me from hoping that maybe there's a possibility that I would see my dad again, said Tom. Now that I got this news, I know that I'm not going to, so it's been very hard. The younger Ernst wants his father to be remembered as a person, not just another set of human skeletal remains found on the lake. He's also taken issue with the suggestions that these bodies were part of mafia murders. I don't want my dad affiliated with any of that, and it's hard just seeing that on the news, he said. So here we see why that type of grouping and lump assumption can actually be hurtful to these families that are dealing with these tragedies. Based on what we've gone through here today, it really seems like, do we have a mafia involved case? Possibly with one, but the police are being very reserved about that. They're not publicly commenting in that direction. And to the point, we don't know who that victim really is yet. We have one person that's a contender, really, based off today's research, and that's it. The other victims in this, there's a very good chance, because of the nature of what this place is, this is a recreation area, there's a very good chance that the majority of them are going to be victims of accidents. And that's what we have here for the first of the confirmed identities when it comes to the bodies of Lake Mead. So let's continue here. Unfortunately, it is not done. A sixth set of human remains were discovered in October of 2022. The latest remains were found again in Colville Bay after a diver saw what appeared to be a human bone on October 17th. A National Park Service dive team then did a full search a day later, and they found a full set of skeletal remains. The Park Service spokesperson also said no foul play is suspected. And that's another important factor in this. The police are only investigating that first one as a criminal matter. Everything else so far is being handled by the coroner's office for their determinations, their testing, and attempts at identification, and nothing more than that we're seeing from the coroners at this point. So where does all this wind up as of the end of 2022? We've got this article at The Guardian from December. Officials are undertaking an exhaustive mission to identify the dead. Since the first set of remains surfaced last spring, a team of investigators, medical examiners, support staff, and consultants have been working to provide answers to the cases that have gripped people around the world. We try to identify these individuals through every possible effort we can put forward, said Melanie Rouse, the Clark County coroner. And let me just say, I'm wishing Melanie all the luck in the world. This cannot be easy. These seem like extremely tough cases to try to figure out. On the forensic front, I don't know. I just don't know enough about DNA. And even then, if you do get good samples, the genetic genealogy thing isn't quite 100%. Is it very, very strong? Yes. But is there a chance that you're going to bump into some type of family that just is not entered into one of those systems? There is still some chance of that. So continuing here at The Guardian, the Clark County Coroner's Office routinely deals with bodies recovered from extreme conditions, deserts, mountains, and bodies of water such as the lake, and each terrain comes with its own set of challenges. Bodies left in water can be exposed to various scavengers, and the currents can carry different parts of the body away, said Jennifer Burns, a forensic anthropologist and professor at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, who has worked with the coroner's office. People could have gone missing upriver, and then their bodies were initially deposited as their final resting place within the lake, she said. But even once the remains are identified, determining a cause of death isn't always possible when only a skeleton is left behind. Unless you have some kind of trauma, bones are not as informative as a full body, where you have soft tissue and organs and skin. It's a huge body of water that's disappearing at a rapid rate. So I would not be surprised to see more, she said. The entire world is in trouble, and it's weird that most people are focusing on the bodies themselves instead of the situation we're in. So she's trying to call the attention back to why we're making these discoveries. It is just a tough problem to get your head around. I don't even know how they address that. You've got the water not only creating electricity, but literally serving water to millions of people. So if you're going to try to supplement that somehow, you're going to have to get water from somewhere else. You might have to get electricity from somewhere else. Costs are going to go up. That's going to impact people in that area as well. What are the reasons for Lake Mead's recession? According to the same site that we started from, azanimals.com, the three main reasons: first of all, population increases around Lake Mead. They've caused a mass depletion of its water since 1999. You've got people, the Las Vegas area and surrounding communities has really exploded. There's been a ton of growth out there for a few decades at this point. Lake Mead and surrounding areas have also been plagued by drought for the last few years. For instance, 83% of Colorado is experiencing drought at this moment. And then on top of that, while many blame the drought for the decreased water levels, it's crucial to understand why these droughts occur. Scientists estimate that 42% of drought conditions near Lake Mead are the result of climate change. And some of the more recent information I've bumped into about this is pretty concerning here at Newsweek. Lake Mead levels are at just over 1,000 feet, 1,047 feet. And effectively, what is known as a dead pool will be reached if the levels drop much further to 895 feet. At a dead pool, Lake Mead water levels wouldn't be high enough to operate the Hoover Dam, which provides electricity to 1.3 million people. At the rate of decline that it looks like just from the photos that we looked at earlier, it seems like a certainty that that's going to happen at some point, that basically Hoover Dam is going to stop producing electricity. What happens then? Grand Canyon Monitoring and Research Center economist Lucas Baer told Newsweek that dead pool levels could occur as soon as this year if drought continues with no proper solutions. If a dead pool is reached, alternative, albeit more expensive, energy sources may be provided, but the sources could have a negative effect on the environment. I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to have to make electricity somehow. So yeah, it's a real problem out there, and we do have these questions. We've still got at least 4 other families trying to figure out or waiting for a call, maybe waiting to have their DNA tested. Around all this, Vegas is going to be Vegas, and we have people that are capitalizing on this in different ways. We have a place called the Blasphemy Boutique selling Lake Mead corpse water. It's a gag gift. It's not real water they're going and taking from the lake, but we also have an attorney who decided to put up an advertisement saying injured while searching for dead bodies at Lake Mead, demand compensation. You know, when you consider that there's a few tragedies at that lake every year, but we're talking decades of that happening, you've got a couple dozen families that have been affected by this. And I don't know, I would just hope that people would think to be a little more respectful and supportive of others in that situation. But one last little update I wanted to give you guys. The family of Thomas Erndt talked about what are they going to do with his remains now that he's been identified. They're actually talking about having him cremated and taking the ashes back to the lake. So that's their way of kind of honoring the journey that they've been through with all of this. A big thank you to everyone that helps keep us supported here at the channel. Honestly, we cannot do this without your guys' help. We always run limited ads. As you're watching today's, you might see one ad at the start, one ad after the video. We don't interject them. We want you guys to be able to focus on the content. We can only do that because of our amazing supporters. A big thank you to PayPal supporter Angela Welch Sola. If you'd like to become one of those supporters, please visit LordanArts.com. There you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, buy merchandise, or even just buy us a coffee like Candy Bishop recently did. We really appreciate each and every one of you out there that keeps us here, helping families in these really, really tough situations. I know today's episode's a little different because we didn't focus on one case in particular, but there's a lot of families affected by this. I'll tell you that's for certain. And thank you guys again. Take care, have a great weekend, and please join us on Monday for the final Monday edition of Case Cracked. You won't want to miss it right here on the LordanArts channel.